Hello and welcome to Brilliance Today, where individuals let their brilliance shine through their stories, expertise and philosophy, because they're on a mission to make a difference and leave a legacy. Introducing Brenda Dempsey, publisher, speaker and TV presenter. Get ready to be inspired.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Brilliance Today. This is a podcast where we share brilliance all around. And I just love my job because I get to speak to some of the most amazing human beings on this planet. And today is no exception. So today in the hot seat is Dr. D, all the way from America, as this is a global podcast. I just let you know where she is, but I'm not going to say too much about Dr. D because I believe in letting the brilliance shine. And she is going to tell you all about who she is, what she does, and why she's passionate about what it is that she does. So, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Dr. D. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It's morning where I'm at.
Well, good morning to you. It's afternoon where I'm at. So there we go. And it'll be evening somewhere, maybe if you're in Australia, if you're listening. So there we have it. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what it is that you're passionate about that brings you great joy.
I have so much passion about many things, but I'm Dr. Leslie Davis, and I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, and I'm licensed in Illinois and Missouri. I'm also a relationship expert, so I love to empower women who are dealing with toxic relationships to help them learn that they're in one for one, but to also learn how to break free from that toxic relationship so they can live in a healthier environment, a healthy relationship, and learn what real love is.
Oh, I like that, what real love is. Would that real love be unconditional?
Absolutely. Love is unconditional. My belief is, I'm a Christian, so God is love and God loves us unconditionally. And that's what I preach.
Absolutely. It's taken me just over 6 decades. So someone says, how people say, and who are you? And most people go, oh, well, I'm a mum, or I'm a publisher, or I'm a doctor, or but actually, no, it's taken me going on an inner journey to be able to say to someone when I get asked that question, I'm Brenda Dempsey and I am love and sunshine energy. That's the essence of my spirit and why I'm on this planet. But that takes a lot of work. So if I asked you who are you, what would you say?
I'm Dr. Leslie Davis and I'm a change agent.
Oh, a change agent. So would you describe yourself as a disruptor? Because I hear a lot of change agents today are using the term disruptor.
I like that term. I would say that I'm maybe not a disruptor, but I'm someone who likes to challenge other people and challenge the way that we think and why we think the things that we do think. Because I'm always questioning why. That's one of my favorite words. Why? Why this? Why that? And what can we do once we figure out the why? What do we do next?
And absolutely, as we know, are you aware of Dr. Simon Sinek? Simon Sinek?
Oh, I don't know that.
Go for Why. He wrote a book called Go for Why, and things should begin with why. So when you work on a brand, you work on why, not what, Yeah. And so why is, for me, is very powerful. But I tell you what, I want to let you into a little secret why I love it so much, because why is connected to your inner child. Think of that 2-year-old and that 3-year-old, and they'll say, Mummy, can I have a biscuit? No, not just now. But why? Because you're going to get your dinner. But why? So children just with their curiosity will say why. So that in itself tells me a lot about you, actually, Dr. D, that you are very connected to that inner child and that curious and that sort of inquisitive mind. And I loved how you said about the challenge. So let's go back to you were saying about like relationships, broken relationships and heartache. So Have you had your heart broken?
Oh, absolutely. I think every woman has at some point in her life. I have been through many toxic relationships, and I had to learn over time why I kept repeating the same pattern with different people. And I think, looking back, the toxic relationships I experienced, they encountered, moments of domestic violence. And interestingly, I was never in a home where there was violence. I've never been in a physical fight myself until I was in a toxic relationship. And typically the statistics show that if you've experienced it, either witnessing it as a child or, you've seen family members fighting, that's something you experience in your own relationships as an adult. But that wasn't my story. My story was different. I was actually working as a child welfare worker, and I would see families dealing with violence, with their children being removed from the homes because of violence, or they were abused themselves. And here I am as a caseworker dealing with it in my own life. But I look back and I recognize that I had to experience that in order to be where I am today to help the people that I'm serving.
And do you feel then that gives you a deeper insight into, I have got a little phrase, Dr. D, it's called walk your talk. When you experience something, you really get below the surface. You really understand it from the inside out rather than just looking in. Yeah, we can teach things. We don't need to we don't need to have visited the moon to maybe learn about the moon or space, right? How many of us actually get to go to space? But sometimes when it comes to human emotions and human situations like that, where there's great adversity, and we'll talk about that in a moment, that when you actually experience it, it gives you an edge when you work with other people within that same field. What would you say about that?
Absolutely. I always hear the question of, people ask themselves, how did this happen to me? And my experience was, I asked myself, why did this happen to me? Why am I here? And without that why, I wouldn't have done the work. I wouldn't have tried to understand, why did I get to this place? Why is this happening to me? And then finding the answer that it happened to me because I was supposed to help someone else. If I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't understand what they were going through, to empower them, to let them know, like, yes, you can get through this too, because I did. And I'm a living example that you can do it.
Hallelujah. And that's exactly right. And so for me, I'm about an I can mindset. There's nothing in this world that you can't do, and your experiences teach you that. You actually know that from birth and developing as a human being, because you sit up, you fall down, you crawl, you fall over, you roll over, you start to walk, you fall down, you walk, then you ride a bike, you fall off the bike, etc., etc. So, which builds all the resilience. So when you experience these things, you find out, well, what knocked me down, why it knocked me down, and how to strengthen that to get back up again and not do the same thing. Although as humans, we do make the same mistakes a number of times before we actually finally learn. But then we can see, how do we break the pattern? Because you already mentioned about breaking patterns. So I think that's a very interesting concept. And I don't think we talk about this whole need to break patterns and maybe how we might break a pattern. What kind of advice, tips, strategies or whatever do you give the women that you work with to help them break those patterns?
Yes, I use what's called the she method. So I encourage women to search themselves, search their heart, to heal their heart in order to empower others. So she. And I think part of that process is helping them to see, looking at their own relationship patterns with the people they've dated. If there's a typical type of person they're dating, typical situations they find themselves in, but also looking at their family patterns. And something I learned about myself, I did what's called a genogram during my PhD journey.
Yeah.
And during the genogram, so it's kind of like a family tree, but you're looking at patterns of different things in your family. So it could be educational background or abuse or death, things like that. And so one thing I learned about my family doing that is that my grandmother struggled with domestic violence. I never knew that until I asked the question, I asked my parents, like, what's your history? What's your parents' history? And so knowing that I never experienced that in my own household, I saw that pattern pop up. I'm like, oh, well, it happened on this side of my family with all the women. And somehow that skipped a generation and impacted me. And so wanting to see the familiar patterns where I could break that for the next generation.
Wow. Wow, that is wonderful. My brother, he's spent 20 odd years doing our family tree. I think I'm going to go and look at a few things in there now that you've brought that to my attention. I am aware to look, but I think how you've explained that there, you see, we can hear something and we might know something, but it takes a special person and their brilliance to say it in such a way that makes us really sit up and makes us become curious and inquisitive and ask why and where is that pattern and how we might break it. So how have you managed to break the pattern?
Honestly, a lot of prayer and knowing that this was not something I wanted to pass down to my son. I didn't want him to have the same experience. I didn't want him to witness anything that he would maybe do in his own relationships as an adult. And so I did the work because I wanted our family to heal, not just myself. It wasn't just a personal journey. I had a mission that I was going to be the change agent in my family. I was going to do things differently. And if I didn't do it, then who was going to do it? So I just kind of took that personal responsibility.
Oh, look, we probably could talk for an hour about personal responsibility. When I look back at other generations, there seemed to be quite a bit of personal responsibility. Maybe I don't know what the word is at the moment. I have to go and reflect on it. But there seems to be a lot of people do not take any responsibility for anything. It's the blame game, But I think we'll leave that for another conversation. But I think you might understand what I'm saying there. Yeah, because taking responsibility is very crucial in us moving forward and being leaders and taking, being responsible for our life and our behavior, our words, our actions, etc., etc. And actually, as you've been speaking there, Dr. D, it's made me realize I'm the only person in my family who went to university, and now my children have gone to university. So
you want to hear something interesting?
Oh, yeah,
I can relate to that. So again, looking at that genogram, my parents are the only college educated people in their families. And here I am, a doctor. So.
You see, it's wonderful, and it's all about generational and when you're born and what was the culture at the time, so back in the day, it was my father, he went to war, people left, there was poverty, so people left school at 14 and got jobs, it wasn't, if you came from a poor background, the thought of even going to university just didn't darken or lighten your doorstep, so to speak, particularly, in Scotland, although my mother's English. But it is very interesting when you look at other patterns. What other unusual patterns have you, sorry, I'm asking you really personal questions. If you don't want to answer anything, please say you'd rather not answer. But is there anything else unexpected when you did your genogram that made you think, oh?
Yeah, I question, where my son's artistic skills came from and his creative side, because I don't consider myself to be creative. And in that, not that way, but looking back, I saw my uncles had this artistic gift that I never knew about, but I had to ask my mom, like, what were some family patterns she noticed? And then also looking at the family pattern of being Christian, but also having this gift to preach and, share knowledge in a different way from a religious aspect. I think that's something that's our family might be known for.
Oh, so some things you continue, some things have become new, some things you've gone back into the past to understand why things have skipped generations. Wow, this is really fascinating. Wow, I really love it. As you can tell by the conversation, I'm really loving it. So Dr. D then, so why did you decide to throw yourself into education in order to get yourself in a place where you could, I won't use the word help because I don't like help, but empower other people?
That's my favorite word, empower. Yes. I knew very early on what my path was going to be. I just didn't know how fast it would happen.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember in high school, I wrote a letter. You know how you have to write the college entrance letters, you know, this is why I want to attend your university.
Yeah.
My plan. And I kept those letters. And even in high school, I knew that I was going to be a therapist. I knew at the age of 13, I was going to be a therapist. I knew when I was in college, I wrote another letter for English class of what my life plan was going to be. And I had specific ages. So I knew I wanted to have a private practice for therapy. I wanted to have a diverse team to help people that didn't look like me. I wanted to have a PhD by the time I was 40. And that happened. I got my PhD when I was 40. So, and I don't truly believe in manifestation. I don't call it that, but I do believe that there's purpose and there's intention. And when you put in the work and you have goals, I'm a very goal-oriented person. You know, when you set those goals for yourself, you know, they tend to happen because you're focused on that. You know, when you don't have focus, you're just bound to go wherever life takes you. So,
sorry, excuse me. I talk about you know, the power of envisioning. So envision what it is that you like. But the thing is, you kind of set that aside. And then, you know, it's like the begin with the end in mind, so to speak. You find that purpose and passion, and then you set on the road and you do the work. And this is, a lot of people think, well, I want to be rich and I want to be this and I want to be that, but they actually don't fully understand that it takes time, effort, blood, sweat, and tears to realize the dream, the intention, achieve the goal. You know, I worked in special educational needs, and we had to set goals every 6 weeks for those children, and then take the small steps to work between them. So we all need those goals, whatever it is, you know. So for example, I will say, right, what 3 things do I want to do today? That when I sit down at 9 o'clock at night, I feel complete and fulfilled in my day. I've been purposeful, you know, not what 23 things do I need to do, and I do 22, but I beat myself up for the one that I don't do. You know, for me, it's mindset. So let me ask you about mindset then. Where does mindset fit into the work that you do?
well, if you have a negative mindset, then you're expecting negative things to happen in your life. You're expecting negativity all around you, and then that's all you see. So if you don't have a positive mindset, you cannot open yourself up to change. Staying that negative mindset, you're going to be stuck. So I do help people think about, you know, what are your thoughts, but I also help them make the connection of their mind and heart. And so not only are you thinking about your thoughts, but how do your thoughts impact your emotions, or how do your emotions impact your thoughts, and vice versa. So that is part of the work that I do in my private practice for therapy and for coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so I talk about fusing heart, mind, and spirit.
Yes.
You know, we're all divine energy, and we're made from love and goodness and image of God and all of these things. And it took me many decades to understand that we're born in the image of God, you know, as it says in the Bible. And I'm quite happy to talk about Christianity here, because you've already said that that's part of who you are. So for me, it took, I remember in my 30s, I learned something and I was like taken aback, and I was like, wow, I had believed X all my life, and now I've been told that that's not true, but this is how You know, we're meant to question things and not just accept it. And yet sometimes people think we've just to accept without questioning. What would you say about that, if you don't mind me asking that question? Do you think that we should be questioning some of these things that we're told?
Absolutely. We can't take everything for the truth because not everything is true, and things change over time and things apply at different times in our lives. And I'm really big about encouraging children to ask questions and us not challenging them to not ask. You know, a lot of times kids are like, well, why this? Like you said, in that inner child, it starts very young. Why? And we have to be curious. If we don't remain curious, then, you know, we can get into a place where we're just being fed information and we don't challenge ourselves. We don't challenge other people. We don't, you know, we're just kind of conforming. And we don't all want to be the same. That's going to be boring, right? So we have to think outside the box sometimes, and it takes different opinions, different experiences, different ways of thinking in order for life to just really evolve.
And it's like interpretation. If you don't mind me sharing a little snippet to make you understand where I'm coming from, because I remember my mother was English, my father was Scottish. My father was Catholic. My mother was Church of England, right? So, and I was sent to Catholic school, and I remember as a 5-6-year-old, I remember some of the teachings at the time was, well, if you weren't a Catholic, you weren't going to heaven. And I remember I used to cry for years that my mother would, if she died or anything, that my mother wasn't going to heaven. You know, so with these young impressionable minds, whereas if I was allowed to question that, instead of just saying, because that's what it is, you know, it's like, do as I say, not as I do, kind of, you know, that kind of thing. Children should be seen and not heard, and don't question us, just do what I say, all that, you know. Whereas nowadays children are asked questions, and hopefully it's a bit different, and they're given information, and you know, they can make their own mind up, you know. And as we grow, it changes over time with our experiences and more knowledge and more you know, pondering and reflection. And you know, so for me it's wonderful to hear you say that, you know, we shouldn't dampen down why, whether we're a child or we're an adult or whatever stage in our life that we're at, because it can have quite an profound impact on our lives. You know, so it's very important that I think we need to be conscious of what we say in front of children, because their little minds, it'll feed, and they'll play over and over and over again, and 2 and 2 will come up 6 instead of 4. Have you experienced anything like that yourself, where you've thought one thing and then you realize over time, well, actually, that's not the interpretation, that was only one person's interpretation?
Yeah, I can't think of a specific example, but I want to get back to, you know, the questioning, you know, and staying curious.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about people who I consider to be wise people, and something maybe I've, you know, read it, or I've seen it on videos, or I've personally encountered it. But typically someone who is wise will answer a question with a question, right? And so they ask the question to get you to think for yourself. They're not going to tell you what the answer is. They're going to let you discover it. And if we don't stay curious, we'll never discover what the truth is. Exactly.
And you know, and I remember once upon a time, and can't remember what decade, it might have been the 80s, the 90s maybe, they talked about discovery learning. So not telling children, giving them, you know, it's like, do you fill up the cup, or do you, you know, let them be curious and go and find it? This is live. I forgot to turn the phone off.
Okay. It's real life.
Real life, you know. I love that. Raw and real, I say, you know, just be raw and real. And yeah, what was I saying there? Sorry, that really threw me.
You're talking about discovery learning.
Oh yeah, discovery learning. So it's just setting up, an environment where children can go in and find things out for themselves and start to ask, but why is this happening? Or maybe you're working with a child and something's frothing over, and you might go, well, look at that. With the vinegar and the baking soda, it can create a volcanic eruption. And they'll go, but why is that happening? Well, why do you think that is? And and get them to just answer the question with a new question. And that new question can just open a new door and a new path of greater discovery for themselves. Because I don't know about you, but I believe when I'm always asking questions, I'm more curious now, I think, than I ever was in my life. I just go and I research everything. And it's so important. And so in your life, do you embrace lifelong learning?
Absolutely.
So what's the latest thing you're learning?
I have been learning about boundaries because I'm in the process of writing my first book. So I'm doing some research about what other people have already said about boundaries and make sure I'm in alignment with that, but also to see if there's a different perspective I could offer. I've also been really studying. So I'm a jujitsu practitioner. And so I'm really striving to get my next belt, my purple belt. So I've been training really hard, but I'm also learning more about the history of jujitsu and some of the wise people that are part of the jujitsu community, learning, their perspective of why we do this move at this time and how to counter and all that. So I've been really diving into, we call them leg locks. So just learning a lot about different women in jujitsu, trying to find different Black women in jujitsu because I don't see many people that look like me in jujitsu. So those are the two topics that I've been interested in lately.
Yes, and I've noticed when I was doing some research and some of the things that you're interested in, you do talk about particularly working with Black women and making a difference there. So within your own work, how do you go about that in making a difference and making sure that Black women are empowered?
It's interesting that Black women find me. I don't really promote myself. I'm bad about that. I probably should do more of that. But typically the clients that find me, I ask them, how did you find out about me? And they're like, oh, I just Googled Black therapists and you popped up. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm here for a reason, obviously. I do think it's important that Black women and Black people in general just have a therapist that looks like them, to build that connection, especially with the stigma surrounding mental health in the Black community. It's not often that you see a Black therapist. And if you do, sometimes they don't have the best reputation. So I'm really aware that I need to make a difference in that way, that I'm presenting what therapy really is, that I'm, really helpful and tapping into the person that's in front of me and making it a personal experience. So they're not just another number. That's something that's on.
And, I think, I think sometimes that representation is something that's overlooked and not given enough credibility is not the right word. Maybe you can help me find the right word. Having representation in many areas and many positions and in many fields has to be broad enough so that people can make an informed decision who they want, to sorry, excuse me, particularly when they've got to open up their souls, so to speak, and talk about things that are painful, to talk about things that they might feel ashamed about, to create a safe space, but it's okay for people to be vulnerable. Because I know in some of the work that I've done in the past around therapy, it's about people feeling comfortable and that there is no judgment whatsoever about what's being said. It's about being listened to, and it's about being understood. How do you ensure that's part of your practice?
That's a mindset that I keep in the forefront because, you know, research backs up that if you don't have a great therapeutic alliance, sometimes people feel like therapy's not working. So you can have all the right skills as a therapist. You can know what to say, when to say it. But if you don't have a rapport with your client, then therapy's not going to be beneficial to them. And they're going to feel it and you're going to feel it too as a therapist. And so what I like to do, I tell all my clients, I'm never sugarcoated. That's one of my taglines. So I tell them, this is who I am. This is who you see here in this office. This is who you're going to see out on the street. You know, so I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to keep it real. I'm going to challenge you. I'm not that therapist that's just going to sit there and be like, okay, how does that make you feel? And then just not say anything. You know, we're going to have a conversation.
And, you know, you've used a few words there. You know, I'm Scottish, as you can tell by my accent, and we've already had a little conversation about that. But I have a saying, walk your talk. So have the experience and make sure people see you doing what you're, I don't like the word pontificating, I don't like that, but what wisdom and you're imparting, but also be raw and real.
Yeah.
You know, so who I am right now talking to you is who I am all the time. So if you see me all over social media, you'll go, oh, that's Brenda, and you'll not see different faces of Brenda. You'll see the same Brenda talking the same way, you know. And I think when you're vulnerable and when you're raw and real, as I say, exactly what you're talking about, or authentic, whichever of these words actually resonates with yourself, do you know what? You can get to say really deep things to people that other people would never be able to say.
Yeah. I challenge all my clients to think about that word of being vulnerable. And the reason why, I had a session with someone, this was a couple years ago, and that person used that word, like, I need to be more vulnerable. And the way they said, I was like, that doesn't sound good. And then I looked up what that word means. I'm like, it means open to attack. I'm like, why would you open yourself up to attack? That's not the right word to use. I think what you really need to be is more transparent. You need to be open, but not open to attack. And so I always challenge people to think, you know, do you want to be vulnerable? Do you want someone to hurt you? Or do you just need to be real and raw with yourself?
Well, it's raw and real, well, real and raw and real, same thing. So vulnerable for me, it's not about, it's vulnerable to me is about being open and not to be ashamed of. So for example, let's say someone's been a drug addict in the past, right? How many people will bury that story? How many people will not want people to know that they've been a drug addict because they've got shame, they've got guilt, they've been eaten, and those negative emotions are at the very base where shame, guilt creates suicide. I know you talk about things like that as well. So therefore, when you're vulnerable to say, look, I once took drugs in my life. I wasn't the best person at that point in my life, but do you know what? I saw the light, I got salvation, I realized I had to change my life, etc., etc., etc. That's, to me, that's being strong, and that's being vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable and you face your truth, you face your demons, you face the fear, boy, that turns vulnerability into power.
Yeah. And I think that's a great example of being vulnerable. Like when there's shame that could be connected to your story, your experience. Yeah. You don't want to share it because you know someone's going to judge that and judge you for what happened to you. That is a true sense of being vulnerable. And
it's like, you know, so I was in an abusive relationship myself for 18 years. And, you know, for years, you don't want to tell people what's happening behind closed doors because you're ashamed that you're allowing it to happen, and like, oh no, and people think you're a pillar of the community and you've got this wonderful family outward facing, like, image, but actually behind closed doors it's like couldn't be further from the truth. So you don't talk about it, you tell no one, there's a shame, there's a guilt. But eventually, I remember when I finally got out that toxic relationship, and I began to speak a little bit about it, people were going, oh my goodness. And I thought, well, I didn't want to really talk about it. But the more I spoke about it, the more I realized I was giving other people permission to be vulnerable too, and to speak about their pain and what they felt was shame. And that's what I think, when we tell our story, we give permission to other people to share their story too, because there's nothing in life that we don't know. And when you own it and you create a change, for me, that's strength, that's resilience, that's courage, that's brave, that's beautiful, and all those negative emotions turn into, you empower yourself to being brilliant.
Absolutely. I can really resonate with that, because I'm also a single mom, and I started a nonprofit called Hearts and Faith that empowers single moms and youth. And I remember my board was like, well, you're the face of the organization. I'm like, I just want to help people behind the scenes. Like, well, they need to hear your story. Like, you're the reason why they're coming. I'm like, but it's not about me. But it was, again, all my experiences, I had to go through those things as a single mom, a Black woman in America. So a Black single mom in America, I had to do all that and tell my story so I can empower others. If I didn't share my story and I was just working behind the scenes, like, here's some help here, here's a resource you can go over there, but I wasn't sharing my personal journey, they weren't connecting to the resources.
I know. So, and if you don't empower yourself and let your power shine, how can you empower others? Because you've got to own it. You've got to own it and show people, well, when you own it, and when you get to, like, I talk about being fetal on the floor at your lowest point, you're in that fetal position. Because I literally was in a fetal position before the light rose within me. It's almost like, what do you call it, when you have like a rebirth? It was like a rebirth, So my book, Voices of Courage, has got a phoenix on the front, a rising phoenix, because that's what it took. Oh, I'm getting quite emotional. That's what it took for me to fully transform. You see? So I
can feel that right now. Just want to let you know, I feel that with you. Yeah, thank you. It's so powerful.
And I always and look, I was West of Scotland Catholic. You get married, you stay married. Do you know what I mean? And I thought one day to myself, I thought, do you know what? Why am I going to stay here and get killed? How's that going to help my children?
Yeah.
No, not all rules are right. And a lot of rules are man-made. They're not God-given. That's another thing.
Religion and having a relationship with God. Religion is
two different things.
Right? Yeah. So religion could have kept me in a position where I didn't tell anyone that I was pregnant, because I got pregnant out of wedlock, right? And so I was a single mom, and I was also, very much in the church all my life, really. And so when I got pregnant, I was like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think about me? Right?
There you go. Shame and guilt.
And there was shame attached to that, but there was also power in that story. And I know God allowed things to happen for a reason. And if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't have been able to help others.
Oh my goodness. I wish I was there in the room, because that deserves, that's a sister hug right there. And thank you for being vulnerable there and sharing that little bit of a story, because we didn't know that was coming out, did we? And that's the power of when we come together and we share our lowest points in our life. Not that getting pregnant is a terrible, shameful thing or anything, but I know what you mean at that time, because it was like, if you're a Catholic, you didn't do these things. There was certain things that were like taboo. And my ex-husband's twin brother's a priest.
Oh,
wow. So you can imagine where we could have a great story talking about all this, couldn't we? Anyway, but the thing is, it's about, like what I said earlier, it's about us being vulnerable to show our power and our brilliance, to give other people permission to do the same. And unless we do it, how can we get these masses of women or men to change their lives?
Exactly.
I can speak about an author I had. He was a police officer, and he came with a memoir for his grandchildren, and it came with the book title Broken Arrow. And he was going really deep into this story about what happened to him, and it really quite shocking. And halfway, not halfway through the book, but once we'd done the golden thread exercises and different things, he decided he was coming under a pseudonym. And, you know, at one point in the story, he decided he was changing the title and he was owning the story. Now, that took a lot of work with me, sort of not therapy, but, you know, just talking.
Yeah.
Talking, why? But why? But why? What was the purpose of that? Who's going to benefit? How can you change? You're changing yourself and you want to change other people, but how can you if you don't own the story? And he went away and he came back a week later and went, "You're right, Brenda, that's it. Right, we're changing it to my own name." And we ended up calling the book Mastering the Wolf. And now he's written a second book all about the wisdom of mastering the wolf.
I like that.
You know, because we talked about what animal instincts we've got, all of us inside, you know, a mama bear, an eagle or whatever. And he was a wolf, he was a wolf. And all the symbolism of what that means, you know. So, and that only comes from knowing that you have to be vulnerable and own your truth.
Yes.
And that's why the word voice is very important, because voice equals truth. But only a truth that's infused with love. If you can't speak your truth with love, don't say it.
I like that. That touched my heart right there.
Don't say it. Love conquers everything, you know. We just need a band of us women going out there and conquering all these wars and all these world issues. Do you know what I mean? And we could create world peace quite quickly. You know, we need those ripples effect. I call them ripples of brilliance. You know, so yeah. So Mastering the Wolf's about changing men from the status quo to newfound men who are heart led. You know, rather than ego. So yeah. Anyway, let's get back to you. So, but you can see the whole point of sharing these little bits as well with the listeners about what you're saying too in your story is that these are universal, and you talk about universal truths, don't you? What happens to one happens to many. So I am all women. I'm sure you've heard that before, you know. I'm not just a woman, I am all women, and all women's in me. You know, there's a great song, isn't there?
Whitney Houston song.
Yeah, it's just
or Whitney Houston, I think Shaka Khan too.
Shaka Khan as well. Yeah, absolutely. I'm every woman, every woman's in me. Yeah, absolutely, you know. So let's look at leadership then. Let's finish up on talking about leadership, because there's no doubt you're a leader and you have this beautiful energy that's full of light and love, but understanding and gentleness. Oh, so how do you use these traits in your leadership?
It's interesting that you said that I'm gentle, because I see myself as very there's like a savage in me, because I'm very passionate. I'm an advocate. You know, I speak up when no one else is speaking. And I think that's part of my leadership style, is like, when no one else is saying what's wrong, I'm going to say something about it. We're going to do something about this. I'm going to call attention to what needs to be fixed. And I think with my leadership style, over time, I've evolved where I've been able to not just lead by example, but tapping into the empowering the person that I'm leading. So again, using wisdom of asking the question, not always giving the answer, not always showing the way, but just kind of helping the person that I'm leading to find their own way of doing things that make sense to them. Because we all have different gifts that we can share. And so I may have a style of doing something and your style might be different. But if I only show you my way and I never help you discover your way, then nothing's going to change.
See, that is so powerful and beautiful right there, Dr. D. Absolutely. And although it's a gentle, don't underestimate the power of the lamb. you know, and the lamb's gentle. I'm trying to think of another animal quickly here that's a very mild and meek, but you know, you know, the tigress or the lioness, you know, gentle with her cubs, but don't attack them because she'll turn on you, you know, and we're all like that. I think you call yourself a lioness, don't you?
I'm a lioness, yes.
Yeah, right, okay. So I'm a tigress, lions and tigers, cats, you know, stripes for me, but it's like that. You need that gentleness, though. You know, me, I'm all energy, right? But you've got this beautiful, your energy vibrates as highly as mine, but I just show it in a different way to you. And we need, that's why ripples of brilliance have all, they're all different energies, but they're all high vibrational energies that come together, because we can't all be the same. You need you need the yin and the yang, and you need the high and the low. You just need that, you know. So I wasn't by any means saying that you've not got that fighting spirit within you. Absolutely. And if there's the elephant in the room, you're going to talk about it and we're going to address it. And it's important to do that. I sometimes talk about being a voice for the voiceless. But over time now, I used that a while ago, but I'm not so sure I like that anymore, because we all have a voice, you know. And who's to say it's your argument right there? Who's to say that I should be the voice or someone else should be the voice? Let them find their own voice, and that's what I do. It's like bring out that greatness and let that brilliance shine. So by asking the right questions of people, guess what happens? They rise. They rise, you know. I rise. I'm sure you'll know that as well. I rise, you know, which is just so beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So what's next for Dr. D?
So I'm in the process of becoming a full-time entrepreneur. That is a journey because that's also something no one in my family has ever done. So I don't have an example. I don't have anyone in my family I can bounce ideas off of. I'm just going for it. You know, I feel like this is the time in my life where I'm supposed to do this. I think God has really, he's been paving the way all this year. And I know next year in 2024, that's the time to actually do it and be full-time in my private practice. I'm also in the process of, you know, booking some speaking engagements. I would love to travel around the world to empower women. So that's one of my personal goals and my professional goals. And I want to finish up this book that I'm writing. I think there are things that have been getting in the way, just, you know, because I work a full-time job, I have a private practice, you know, I have a son that has severe medical issues. He's a heart patient. And so just kind of balancing everything as a single mom, it's challenging. And so I just need more time to, you know, have that mental space to get things done, to wrap some things up. But I just know that there's more doors that are going to open, and I want to be clear-minded to know what door should I walk through.
Exactly. And I think if you know, when you're really connected to who you are and you're aligned with your purpose and that passion, you know, I set intentions and then I forget about them. And then the next thing I go, wait a minute, I remember saying I wanted to do X, Y, and Z. And I think, hey, I'm doing it. How did I get here? You know? So this is my little philosophy. Enjoy the journey. Keep your eye on the goal, but enjoy the journey. I think when you enjoy yourself and the joy comes out, you things happen faster and quicker. There's interventions. People come into your life. You know?
I'm seeing that.
People come into your life, and I'm just thinking I'm in your life for a big reason, you know? As I discovered interviewing someone else yesterday as well. And this is what happens. So sometimes people come into my life and I'll go, oh, they're in my life because of this. And then sometimes they'll come into my life and I'll go, I need them more than they need me. I need to go and do work with them because they're going to help me. And then sometimes somebody come into my life and I think they're in my life because I know I've got a key for them. I can hand it over. And it'll be the same for your clients.
Yeah.
So I bet you every author that's been in my life, or every coaching client, therapy client that's ever come into my life, child, team, anybody, they're either teaching me something, or I'm teaching them something, or the situation's teaching us something. You know? And I think when you're open to that, you can go away and reflect, and you will know why. You will know why. It's taken me years to really be conscious of that. But before, I just thought, oh, what's going on? You know, I was beginning to see, but I was still blind, you know, another biblical term, you know. It's about taking the darkness, bringing it into the light, opening your eyes, your heart, so that you can see, you can truly see.
You're so wise.
I just feel that that's so beautiful. I feel as if I want to pray now.
We can. I'm all for prayer.
I'm all for prayer. Okay, so let's do something different. Let's finish with a prayer of thanks, which I would like to ask you to lead for this wonderful union and conversation that our listeners have been listening to today. If you don't mind, Dr. D, would you please finish our conversation with a prayer of thanks?
Absolutely. I will close my eyes for this.
Me
Thank
too.
you for this beautiful moment. Thank you for this beautiful soul that I'm speaking to today, and for all the beautiful souls that are listening to this podcast. God, we just thank you for giving us enlightenment, for encouraging us, for encouraging our hearts, for showing us the power of connection and the power of our stories. And we know that it's because of you that we are who we are and where we're going. And we just thank you for everything that you're doing and everything that you're going to do in the future. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Now, that's a first. I'm quite tearful. It felt right.
Yeah.
It just felt right the way this conversation is going. So now you can see why I never, ever say, well, what we're going to talk about, because I didn't know we were going to talk about all this.
You never know.
I have a rough idea of some of the things I want to tease out that you do. But when you're spontaneous and we listen, not just to the words, but the feelings in our heart, look where it led us.
Yeah, that's the Holy Spirit.
Exactly. Amen and hallelujah to that. Well, Dr. D, I tell you, this won't be the last conversation we have. I'm sure I'll get you back and we'll talk about lots more things. And it's been an absolute pleasure to you to grace us today and to give us your valuable time. And I wish you a beautiful day in everything that you do. So everybody, there you've had it. We've listened to Dr. D in this Brilliance Today, and you're going to be blinded by the light. And I hope you felt that, because I have been truly moved today. And there we go. We didn't know how this was going to end. So until the next time, this is Brenda saying, be brilliant. Much love. And to the pet.
That's it for this episode of Brilliance Today. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For more information or to contact Book Brilliance Publishing, visit bookbrilliancepublishing.com. And remember, do different. Be brilliant.